Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last Q&A of the Friday Harbor Film Festival for 2021. From the San Juan Islands in the Salish Sea, the traditional territory of the Straits Salish and Coast Salish peoples since time immemorial. We're joined by Liz Smith, producer and writer of Changing Seas. Liz is a producer, writer, and strategist and has an MFA in the study of science and natural history filmmaking. Welcome again, Liz. It's great to see you again tonight. We can pick up almost where we left off yesterday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on a successable festival.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think the team did a great job this year, as well as all the filmmakers. We're so have a lot of gratitude for the incredible efforts on the part of the filmmakers to do their work. Very inspiring. So, Changing Seas. What an awesome, adorable research vessel ALVIN is.
It is. I should say too that Changing Seas is a South Florida PBS TV show, and this particular film was one episode of the 13th season, and it's ALVIN, Pioneer of the Deep. And it was a co-production with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which operates ALVIN out of Woods Hole.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. So this is going to get onto a network and continue educating people about not only what the lineage of ALVIN does today, but way back, to 50 years ago, which is really what's so intriguing about ALVIN.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the pieces that I actually found fascinating in just doing the research and finding out more about it is I've known, just doing ocean research in general, and ocean filmmaking, I've known about ALVIN for many years, but and I've sat in it. I've never gone down in ALVIN, but I actually had a chance to sit in it at one point when they were at dock, and I had no idea until I started actually digging into this and doing this documentary that that Ship of Theseus idea, right? That there isn't really an existing part left from the original. I thought it was the same one going down over and over since the 50s and 60s. But the idea that they keep replacing parts as they go along, and yet it's maintained, it's still ALVIN, I think is such a fascinating concept that sort of ties it all together. And you really get the impression, working with the researchers and the engineers that have worked on it for years, you really get the impression that it is this sort of living embodiment of the exploration and excitement that they do. So,
right, yeah, there was really just so much character involved and so many components about its existence. I think they referred to it as a thought puzzle in terms of what you just brought up, that there's no one piece today that existed as part of ALVIN back when it was created. So is it the same vessel? So the thought puzzle. Yeah, they also talked about all of the different types of ists, biologists and chemists and geologists and virologists and volcanologists who have converged around ALVIN, and the collaborations that ALVIN has enabled and kind of caused along the way. Can you expand a little bit on that and really what that provides?
Definitely. I think it's really interesting. A lot of times in science, we see issues these days with, like, people are so siloed in their science, and we were speaking about, with climate change. It's really, sometimes it's hard with climate because it's like, it's everything all at once. And it's not so easy to just say, like, you're only studying this piece or looking at this piece. And so I think when you have a tool like ALVIN, one of the reasons I wanted to highlight ALVIN is because oftentimes we do documentaries or shows about one particular species or one particular, like, just something that has to do with biology or geology, and I love just the idea of a tool that we use, the technology that we use, and the way that it brings all of these different people together. And I think that was one thing that everyone that I talked to in interviews for this story spoke about, was that that, like, interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary work of getting people together who work in different disciplines and who can ask each other questions and say, hey, I didn't even realize this. I didn't know this. They speak about when they found hydrothermal vents, when Bob Ballard found hydrothermal vents and that team found them the first time, they were a bunch of geologists, right? They weren't expecting there to be biology. And so when they found it, they were like, quick, get a biologist. You know, we need to find out what all this stuff is. Because they didn't know, because they were, you know, they were just looking at the one piece that they were looking at. And so I just love that aspect of ALVIN, that it brings those people down together.
And what do you
end up with something bigger than the sum of the parts?
Right. And unexpected results. Have you heard of what type of discoveries might have ensued from those collaborations that might not have otherwise happened if it was planned out?
Definitely. Well, and certainly hydrothermal vents. I think the big question is what, you know, going forward with the upgrades, where they're going to go. I know they're going to be going to an area called the Hadal Zone, which is, it's like, I think it's about 4 miles down to the bottom. And it's an area where there's a lot of carbon cycling. So you have like dead plankton and whale fall, and it's a big carbon sink, but it's also where a lot of our trash and pollution ends up as well. And so it's actually they're going to be bringing a lot of folks from different disciplines to look at that piece of the puzzle. And so we're going to be able to look across everything from our impact to the carbon impact, to looking at new species that might come out of that area. So that's going to take people from all disciplines to look into that when they get down to those depths.
You know, there was one scientist, was it Jason? He was from Texas A&M, and he made a point of saying that all of the work that he does stems from work that was done on ALVIN. And when you consider that's just one person, one researcher, you know, how would you map it if you were to say how many people around the world are doing work that might stem from ALVIN? What could that look like?
Yeah, hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah, that was me interesting speaking with them about too, is just how many different like there's been, I think there's about I think they said about 3,000 different folks have dove in ALVIN, and there someone else, I think it was Amanda Demopoulos in the film, says something too about that when you go down an ALVIN, you're representing an entire scientific team. You're not just doing your research. You're there to collect data and specimens and imagery for an entire team that's back on the boat and also back on land. And even nowadays, especially with having like being able to have live feeds from sea and actually having folks on land talking to folks in ALVIN, which they'll be able to do going forward, you're collecting for people all over the world. And then those folks are able to do their work that comes back out of just the 3 people going down in it at once. So yeah, it's very cool. The other thing that like Jason talks about too is it's like generational, or, you know, folks, some of the archival footage it's so cool to see old photos of like Tim Shank and Don Wright, who are in this film, to see them as like grad students, right, in the 90s working on ALVIN, and now they're the older generation who are overseeing the younger generation going on their first dives. There is definitely a community there of folks that are sort of passing the torch, and that have sort of stood, when they talk about standing on the shoulders of giants or the folks before you, they really, you can see that there's this thread through all of it that's just kind of amazing. In the same way that ALVIN is constantly built and changed, right? These people are also all connected to each other down a thread line. It's really a fascinating little piece of our society.
Gosh, what a tapestry. What a tapestry. And it all started with, was it the Swiss guy did the first one, and then Alan Vine built the US one. And yeah. So, okay. Well, now, it goes down at 8 in the morning and comes back at 5. So where do they go to the bathroom?
It's so funny. It's like the same thing they ask the astronauts, right? Like, where do they, I think there's nowhere to go. So it's probably like a bottle or a, you know, some sort of thing where you just gotta say, hey guys, look the other direction. And it is, like I said, I have sat in Alvin. It is, it's, it's roomier than you would expect, but it is small, and you're not, it does feel like a sphere inside. And so you are like, you are sort of like leaning against a concave wall. And everyone's like if you're all sitting backs, like your feet are all touching, right? Like it's very close. So I think there's also a little bit of that, like, you know, try not to eat anything stinky before no garlic, no onions, none of that stuff before you get in the sub, that kind of thing. I think they're pretty careful about that stuff. There's actually um, Trish Gregg, who is also in this. She provided a bunch of her sort of almost like home movies that she did. She actually, when they did their cruises, she did a YouTube series that's a very it's sort of that personal view of it, right? Like, here's what's going on, and she has a ton of great videos on YouTube if you look her up, that really give that sort of hands-on personal experience of those kinds of questions, right? Which is like, what is it like? What are your fears when you're about to, what's it like when you wake up and you're about to go down an Alvin? What do you worry that you might say or do, or those kinds of things? And so it's really lovely to sort of watch her. It's really, really authentic, vulnerable, open experience about going down an Alvin.
Oh, that's great. Can you say her name again so people can find it on YouTube?
Sure, it's Trish Gregg or Patricia Gregg. And I'm pretty sure if you just search her name in Alvin, it comes up.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun to watch, kind of as an addendum to this film of yours. So I love seeing this like super expensive vehicle, and then, you got the underwater shot, and this like underwater, there's the quintessential sort of milk crate style lab cartons that are on the platform, for collecting samples, I suppose. I just thought that was a great juxtaposition, that the milk crates will never go away. It seemed like.
Absolutely. And that's, it's engineers, right? I used to work on a research vessel, the Nautilus, and same kind of thing. We had a ROV, big ROV system that would go down, and it was combination of like the latest high tech, 4K beautiful gear type footage, and like gum and duct tape, and like you said, milk crates. Especially when you're out at sea, especially on these expeditions that are pretty far from shore, a lot of times you are literally just working with what you have on the boat at the time, and so you always see that kind of stuff. So in those realms, I think folks enjoy that piece.
I kind of like the reality of that. I mean, it keeps it real, and it means you're at the cutting edge. It means you're a pioneer, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was curious. I noticed in looking at the credits that there was no director listed for this film. So you were the producer and the writer. Was there just no need for a director, someone in that role for this film?
No, we just don't. I mean, essentially, I was the director. We don't credit that role on Changing Seas. It's just the producer. Essentially, there's 4 episodes a year. I think it's like I said, Alvin was in the 13th year, so this year's the 14th year. And the series producer, Alexa Elliott, usually produces 2 of them. I produced 1 last year. I'm doing 2 of them this year. And the producer writer, basically, you're responsible for the story. So I did all the research and did the interviews. And this one actually in particular was an interesting one because we normally with Changing Seas, we go on like an expedition, right? So we'll go out with folks on a, one trip to go do that. And this was right when the pandemic hit, actually. And part of this was looking first, like, what's a story we can tell without doing a ton of travel, because it was right in the thick of it, that this was being made. And so part of this was actually that we worked with local crews. It's a lot of archival footage. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution provided, yet they opened up their archive to us, and I worked with their archivists, who were like amazing folks that like have tracked Alvin's progress through all the years, and basically just dug through their archive, and they just have so many amazing just you saw some of it, the old photos and old film reels. And one
Yeah,
of the things that
Liz, tell me the truth. You're really doing these films so you can get access to the archival footage, right?
that's it. That's it. I grew up on Ken Burns. I grew up watching the Civil War was what I watched when I was a kid, that documentary. And I absolutely love archival footage. I think it's so, I love the way it connects us across the past and across generations. And it's also that sort of thing, like not like learning from the past and not forgetting history. And one of the things I love is just watching, like, just by virtue of starting in, whatever it is, 1950s, coming up to now, you actually see the progression of the types of footage. Like, it goes from still photography and canister film reels all the way up through like what look like VHS recordings, beta recordings, and then you see the stuff that they're filming now, and it's just gorgeous underwater cameras. Underwater filming is a really interesting, underwater cinematography is an interesting place to look at that progression of technology, right?
Right, you're so right, and you get a little bit of fashion, hairstyles, types of ears. That's a really good point. I mean, it's like a whole history thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved some of the archival footage. Now, how was it wading through that? Did it take a long time to sift through it and decide what to use, what not to use? And what other archival footage did you come across that you might want to talk about that didn't make it into the film?
Definitely. There's a ton. It's endless. There's an endless resources of footage that they have from the years. And I think one thing is that a lot of the older stuff is still photography. So for the most part, I ruled that out unless I sort of needed to use it, because I do prefer moving imagery for what we're making. Um, and gosh, the hardest thing was picking, like, at the end, talking about all the different people over the years. There's just so many people, to only pick a few, right, to include was hard. There's some really incredible old footage, actually, because ALVIN, they went down to Titanic with ALVIN. And there's just amazing footage of Titanic with the Jason submersible as well. And it's funny, part of the reason I didn't use a lot of that, there's a little bit at the beginning just to acknowledge it, but we really wanted to go into the science, like the sort of harder science, geology and hydrothermal vents and biology work. So we didn't want to get too wrapped up in the Titanic piece. It's because there's just so much great Titanic footage out there that folks have seen already. So it was hard to see all of that footage and not sort of use a lot of it. But I just wanted to stay away from that story as much, because I wanted to grab some things that you hadn't seen before, I think. And also just those old videos. I think the thing to me, watching the old footage of them making the sphere, the when they like pound out the steel sphere,
Yep.
and just thinking that, like, folks, they made that and then got in it and went down underwater. And that still seems just like nuts to me. I think it's amazing that people have that kind of ingenuity, but also bravery to say, yeah, I'm going to make a steel sphere and go down to the bottom of the ocean in it. I think that's
A little bit
fascinating.
like crossover Evil Knievel almost.
Just a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just love that old footage of them saying, yeah, we're just going to tinker around and build this and see what happens. It's just
That's
so
one way of
cool.
saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, a lot has happened. Yeah, there's quite a family, and there's a lot of pride you could see, from some of the speakers that you had, the pilots, and they had who's the guy who's in charge of he's the chief scientist at Woods Hole, right? Is it Adam Sewell, the chief scientist of
Yep.
submersibles? Well, he's
Yep.
Data's brother from Star Trek, right? He's like Data's cousin. Data, you remember Data from?
Oh, I do remember it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's in
Yeah.
charge of
Adam's Yeah, Adam's great. And then Bruce Strickra as well, who is the engineer, chief pilot. Um, Bruce definitely, man, he added so much, just honestly philosophy to it. When I went to interview Bruce, and I expected to spend a lot of time talking about engineering and ballast systems and cameras, and I thought he was going to give me kind of a download on the upgrades of what what they were doing to the sub in sort of a very mechanical engineering type fashion. And we spent 2 hours talking about, like I said, the Ship of Theseus piece, the philosophy of like, why does Alvin feel like it's its own living creature, to the idea that he was telling me one thing I couldn't get in to fit in this. When he talks about that when three people go down in Alvin, they become like one. Like there's this thing that happens where they become Alvin, right? And they're talking to the boat as Alvin. I mean, it's just really fascinating. He's been diving in Alvin for, I think he said something like 20 years. And so he's seen so many people do their first dives. He's seen landscapes that all of us can only dream of seeing. And so he's just really fascinating to talk to. He has such an interesting perspective on life and exploration and what it all means. So it's just so cool to talk to him.
You know, you could really sense that. That
Yeah.
really came through. And, you know, I guess thinking about it, the guy gets to spend so much time with these folks who are like peeking out on their excitement of doing these dives. So yeah,
Mhm.
he's the good guy for the job. Um oh shoot.
What?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say one thing too that I think doesn't isn't in there that I don't think we could use it because it's just a copyright issue. But they also when they're, I mean, they spend a lot of time diving, right? In terms of meaning like they'll spend 2 hours getting to the bottom. So they do have a lot of just downtime waiting. So there's a lot of chatting, but they also just have like playlists. So they'll plug in music and just like tune out and chill to music. And so I also just love this idea of just floating in the sphere to, you know, whatever it happens to be, whether it's like rock tunes or jazz or EDM or whatever that group's kind of thing happens to be. I love this idea of a little like three people in this little tiny sphere floating in the bottom of the ocean with like rocking out to the Beatles or something. It's just a cool it's just a cool image. It's
Oh
crazy.
yeah. Oh, that's like that is an experience that is not going to end up on too many people's bucket list. But that's a
Yeah.
yeah, what a great the good for around the campfire.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's cool. It's one of the things in the midst of the pandemic stuff too is wanting to tell a hopeful story. I think we were talking about that with the like climate stories and stuff, and trying to I'm really sort of adamant about trying to find stories that are inspiring or that are, you know, action driven or solutions driven, to say, you know what, there, you know, it's not all hopeless. We are actually, there are people out there that are doing things, that are finding things, researching things, looking for answers. And that exists, it still exists. So that's also a piece of the, like the inspiration piece. Hopefully people walk away from this going, wow, cool, like cool, that's so cool. Like I'm glad that there's humans out there doing this. And I hope that they're able to find things with with the new upgrades and going deeper. I'm hoping that they will come back with some more amazing discoveries that will be good. So
Has anyone done like a map? That would be really interesting to see, like a family tree of research that has
mm,
been and is being done so that people could get a sense of how it's being applied to solve some of the problems that we need to today. That would be kind of interesting. Has anyone
mhm.
talked about that?
I haven't seen one but that would be absolutely fascinating. Yeah, it would be really cool to see, even with, like you said, something like Alvin, all the different folks that have gone down in it, and then have all the branches of the folks that have been impacted by that work. It would be really cool. That'd be like a massive undertaking with the number of folks, but yeah, that would be very cool. That'd be a cool research project.
It would be. I can
A family
imagine
tree.
just the right archivist out there who would love to dig their nails into that one. You
Yeah,
know.
definitely.
And yourself, you know, so, you know, Liz, you're a filmmaker
Mhm.
and you're also, you have other activities that you take part in. And I think there's enough of other activities that you might not even seem like you have time to do filmmaking. I mean, what are all the activities that you do here in
um,
Spin Ones?
Oh, in the San Juans, I'm trying to narrow it down. Here in the San Juans, I'm actually the president of our local Grange, and I wasn't in the Master Gardener program, so I do a fair amount of working on sort of growing food at home here. But my primary efforts are in film. I'm doing 2 episodes right now for Changing Seas, and so I'm in post for one. Actually, the one of the ones that I'm filming, I was just out filming a couple weeks ago, is going to be an episode that will release next year on kelp in the Salish Sea, because I really wanted to do a story located here at home. And so I was filming with PSRF, the Puget Sound Restoration Fund, NOAA, Department of Natural Resources, Friday Harbor Labs. We were actually out with a researcher at the labs, and also the Samish and the Suquamish tribes we were filming with. And so that'll be a story about kelp, mostly bull kelp in our region, and how important it is, and also just decline and what folks are doing to restore it. And I think it's gonna be an interesting story for here. And then
And
I'll
how
be
about
doing another.
CDOC? Is CDOC, are you involved with CDOC at all on that one?
I don't. I've actually spoke with them a couple times, and we've talked about doing a Changing Seas, trying to collaborate on Changing Seas episode, but we haven't, with the pandemic and everything else, we just haven't managed to connect on it yet. But yeah, I love the work that they're doing to highlight the region and science here and everything else. So, and then I was gonna say the other thing too, that I'm working on a educational ed tech startup that's doing shows for middle schoolers that are, it's much more, it's kind of like Master Class meets Mr. Rogers. So it's working with kids, doing videos for kids basically about social and emotional learning. So that's like a whole nother avenue that I'm working on as well. After doing Youth v Gov, working with youth, just wanting to do more for the next generation, just to help them with everything they're coming into as they become adults and are going to have to grapple with. So
Did you say social and emotional learning?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's social emotional learning. It's a field, SEL. It's kind of like STEM, if you know STEM, science and tech and engineering and math. SEL is another sort of field within education that is helping teaching students. It's self-management, self-awareness, social awareness. It's how to be a good human, right? Which I think we could all use those kind of lessons. So that's like, it's Mr. Rogers did a lot of SEL, even though I don't think it was classified as that at the time. But it's that kind of work. So that's also become important to me as well.
I still don't know how you have enough time to do it all. I mean, the quality of your work is really top notch. Takes a lot of research. It's beautiful, crystal clear, gorgeous stuff. Beautiful.
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you. I should say we just got nominated for 2 regional Emmys for this ALVIN episode. So that's great. Our whole team was nominated. In fact, the Changing Seas group was nominated for a number. So that's really fantastic for them. And that also helps keep the show going as well. And actually, I should mention Changing Seas, the funders. It is funded by the Batchelor Foundation and the Perot Family Endowment for Environmental Education. Thank you. Yes, the Perot Family Endowment for Environmental Education. So I definitely need to mention our funders and our sponsors, because we can't do this work without folks that fund it, which is true of so many documentary filmmakers out there. So
right.
Always have to mention that.
We have about a minute to go, Liz. You've given us some great messages already. I mean, just listening to the work you're doing and the kind of stuff you're trying to wrap your head around. Kelp, really looking forward to more on kelp. That's just I think we're starting to learn a little more that it's underappreciated, but needs to be appreciated more for what it is. Yeah. And then, of course, the sea stars and Cy and Snow from PNW Protectors did their film on the sea stars coming back. And if we had more time, we could go there. But maybe once you get your next film out on or do this project, we can reconnect and get some learning going, and outreach and education on that, because that goes right up to the southern residents, right up to the apex.
It does. I can't wait to put this story together. The connections of kelp to everything that people care about is direct. It's a direct food web line to the orca and seabirds and rockfish and salmon. they're all interconnected. And I was like kelp, and then I started learning about it, and I am absolutely fascinated, and I can't wait to share that.
I'll just say one final thing. I was on a webinar today with Dr. Deborah Giles and a few others, and she was talking about how the killer whales like to play with kelp, and the bunch of them were theorizing why they do it. And I just realized, well, even if it is just playing, maybe they're just trying to tell us all the way from kelp to us. It's a connection.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we're gonna close out the Friday Harbor Film Festival, and I just feel so honored for you to be here and for all the great filmmakers we've had, and just keep at it. You're a powerhouse, Liz, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your work.
Happy to be here. Thanks for doing the film festival. Thanks for highlighting so many amazing filmmakers. It's just great to see. Yeah.
Yeah, ditto. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, and check out Liz's films and tell her how great of work she's doing, and keep it funded and keep it coming. Looking forward to Kelp, Liz.
Me too.
Take care, everybody.